All right. Kristy Jo Hunt, how are you doing?
I am doing so great. How are you, Chris?
I'm a little tired. I had to stay up to watch the Patriots game last night.
How did they do? I unfortunately did not catch it.
In true Patriots fashion, they won on the last play of the game at about midnight.
Wow.
So,
good for them. Actually, I think I saw this on the TV when I was training this morning. Was it kind of a long run that they made it in?
No, it was the other team missed the field goal with 40 seconds left. So.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Nonetheless, they won. Great.
So, Kristy Jo, why don't you give me the 200 words or less on who you are and what you do and why we're talking?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast. I am a fitness nutrition specialist, certified personal trainer, and a mindset coach. I run an online business for 4 years now after, in 2012, coming to a point where I realized my disordered eating habits were really hurting me. And my whole life I have been fit. I've run a lot of races. I've trained very hard. I've been a dancer my whole life, and I always wanted to figure it out. But I didn't have the full scientific understanding of how nutrition and fitness worked. And above that, the emotional and psychological ability to bring it all together to make me a better person. And now that I've figured it out, my personal journey is sharing that with as many people as will listen. So thank you for this opportunity to share.
Sure. And like I was saying, I'm always interested in talking to people who have figured something out, right, have made a transition. And I think your story's super interesting because you had a lot of challenges, but you're obviously a very driven, very smart, very accomplished person. But even with all that, you were struggling with disease. You were struggling with just the mental aspect around nutrition.
Absolutely.
And I think that may be something we miss, right? When we see people who are successful and driven, especially in athletics, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So what were some of those challenges that you had to overcome when you were going through all this?
I think it's not exclusive to women. Men definitely struggle with it as well, but the overriding feeling of needing to measure up to the body image of what's out there in the media. And with that comes these expectations or such of how we need to be eating. Now, because I wanted to mimic a lot of the bodies I was seeing that were out there in these athletes and on the magazines, and I would go read all these books and try to implement what they were saying. And without the ability to understand adaptability for me and what would happen when my emotional triggers would come up. For those who don't know, an emotional trigger is something that leads us to lose a little bit of our conscious decision-making ability. I believe the subconscious mind, which studies show is about 90% of our decision-making ability, and that's everything that lies under the surface. That's our conditioning over time, and only 10% is conscious, that we're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow through. So when an emotional trigger comes up, which could be loneliness, fatigue, stress, anger, any of these things that take away from that conscious ability, then our subconscious programming will be defaulted to and take over. So what I didn't understand was I was going through all these conscious, again, that 10%. I was going through these conscious efforts to be on point nutritionally, be that awesome person. I wanted to reach that body, but I was not focusing on what contributed to the subconscious programming. So things like, how do I view myself as a person? How do I view food in general? Is it good or bad? I now believe that there is no such thing as good or bad food, and I personally use a new vernacular. One of the biggest things I teach people is to change food from good or bad to calling it strategic or non-strategic foods, which we can only define those if we have a goal. So a lot of those things of how to manage when we experience those rough times in life, that's why people are always on again, off again, on again, off again with dieting, with fitness, with anything. When we can figure out those answers and stop getting caught up in our own cyclical behavior of sabotage, that's when those real answers come.
There's a lot of things going on there. Let me try to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing, to quote you, eating really isn't about food.
Right.
Eating's about mental. It's about thought patterns. It's about lifestyle, right?
Absolutely.
And people get into these binge and purge cycles. Like, I mean, you were in that, and we've all been there, where you get really frustrated and you say, I'm going to do it. This is the week I'm going to do it, and I'm going to put my foot down and lose a bunch of weight. And all that does is sort of make the cycle worse because you get to the end of that and your mental takes over and you purge on the other side, right? Or binge on the other side. It actually makes it worse. So the starting point is not the food or the diet. The starting point is understanding how mentally you approach that nutrition and that life cycle.
Yes,
right?
Very well said. And with that, there's a little bit of psychology to understanding our own ability to apply ourselves to rewards or those incentivizing what most people call cheat meals. That word's forbidden in my vernacular. I use the word indulgence because cheat implies something negative, and that sets us up, again, subconsciously for on again, off again. It's a very black or white way of thinking, rather than indulging is part of the plan. You're not doing anything wrong. And so you plan for your indulging ability. My whole life, I was told by the people around me that I just needed to be more moderate, because they would see these cycles. They would see me going restrict, and then go ham on the brownies, and not just eat one or two, but be sneaking in there after everyone else has finished, because I couldn't control that. But that was when I was in a mindset of being more of an abstainer. Now, these words, I got to give credit where credit's due. Gretchen Rubin, who runs a podcast called Happier, she's the one that first coined these, and I was able to listen to that and say, I wonder if we can start applying this towards the way I eat and the way I train people to eat. And once I began doing this, it has made a huge difference. So if we're someone that really just needs to stay away for quite some time, otherwise we are going to go crazy, then being an abstainer and following that, which is maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, following that strategy is more advantageous than a moderator strategy. A moderator strategy is the person who needs that little bit every day. And so they set themselves up and they come up with a strategy where it's what I teach people to do is 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates total. Whatever the food is, I don't care, but 20 to 30 grams total carbs. And that's it. That's what they can indulge in. And over time, what I have seen with myself from a former binge eater that definitely was an abstainer because I just couldn't control myself. But over time, I've actually trained myself to be a moderator. But that's taken time and that's taken effort. And so for a moderator to tell an abstainer, you just need to eat a little and enjoy it, it's a severe misunderstanding of how deep the psychological rooting goes into how we view food. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot going on here, right? So
sure.
The first thing is doing a little bit of self-awareness with any change. So you have to look and say, are you that person who hates their body? And a lot of people probably don't like looking at themselves in the mirror. Everybody's critical of themselves. And how do you feel about food? How do you feel about diet? That those mental triggers, identifying those, right? When does this happen? How does it happen? What are the emotions going in? And it's just like any other habit. If you can identify those triggers and then put a different pattern in place for that trigger, a more moderate pattern or behavior, you can beat a lot of that. And actually, it helps you sort of gamify it. And then the second part of that is say, okay, now that I figured this out, what are the tools? What are some simple methodologies to plug into that pattern, that new pattern that I want?
Right.
And a lot of people skip that self-awareness step, and a lot of people don't have the tools, or they're relying on the popular culture for the tools, which are just this particular area is such a mess in the world. It's so fraught with emotion and lack of any actual understanding and opinion and dogma. It's just a tough place to go and say, I need help, because you just feel like you're getting bushwhacked, right?
Yeah.
So I just said a lot there. So let me ask some specific questions. What are some of the tools that you're bringing to the table to help people replace the pattern?
Great question. I wrote a book called The Power Foods Lifestyle, and in it is a totally new method of thinking about food that I created first and foremost for myself. I didn't intentionally start a business. It kind of happened by default once people were learning about what I had done to change myself. So in this, I help people come up with this particular budget. I call them peak ranges of certain macronutrients. For instance, we break it down to protein, carbohydrates, fats, and then I put vegetables in their own category. Yes, they're a carbohydrate, but they're a different type of carb than our higher carbohydrate sources like brown rice and yams and red potatoes and all of that. So once the learning curve of what portion of food equates to a P or a C or an F, once that initially is passed, then we can start to come up with these acronyms for how we eat. And so everyone that goes through my training begins to speak on a different level. When you say, what's your strategy of eating? I would say my strategy is 5 PVS meals and a PVC, which follows my workout. That is a representation of how to combine certain nutrient groups for an optimal experience in your body. Now, the cool part of having a nutrition strategy is that you have a whole ton of foods you can choose from, and it's not so much this diet. You leave the diet world and you start to think strategically about the combination of foods. We don't count calories. It's an awareness and it's a mental food budget, and it has saved me. I cannot track things in an app. I go crazy. And I know that there's a great demographic of people out there that know the obsessions and know how hyper-focused we can become on this. And it's terrifying. Once you're in that world and food consumes your thoughts from sun up to sundown, it's not a happy place.
No, it's punishing. It's punishing to have to track all that stuff. And I think what I liked about your methodology is it's similar to a lot of the lower carb methodologies. Foods in category A, foods in category B. You have your lists of foods and you combine them depending on what time of day. And that makes it very simple for people. It's like a little connect the dots puzzle.
Right.
One of these, one of these, one of these.
Exactly.
And the key is, again, psychologically, not counting calories, but making sure you get the mix right.
That's it.
And making sure that the stuff you're putting into that mix is the whole food, the healthy stuff.
Exactly. And giving ourselves, just on that note really quick, realizing we want to primarily be choosing those power foods, those foods from the earth. But I'm really against the whole clean eating mentality because, again, that sets us up for on again, off again, black or white thinking. And so instead it's know when you need a non-strategic food, eat it strategically, pair it correctly with your anchor of a protein and veggie, keep it to the proper portion size, and it creates a whole new lifestyle of not fearing food but thinking strategically.
Right, and it keeps you from having to worry about the calories in, calories out.
Yes. Which
calories in, calories out will get you the first 10 or 15 pounds, but then you'll plateau.
Yes.
Because your body figures it out. Your body says, oh, you're on a restricted calorie diet, so therefore the biochemistry needs to be different. And you can actually change the way your body responds to food by doing that for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
Your body becomes much more efficient. It figures it out. Your human body is an amazing thing.
Oh, it is.
So getting the mix right prevents that starvation response, the glycemic response, all that. And the other thing I like about the way you laid this out is it's not one of those high-protein ketonic diets, which I'm not going to argue dogma with anybody, but
Sure.
that just doesn't seem healthy to me.
And I'll just save 10 seconds worth on that. There is a small demographic of people that way, that adaptation can be really good for, but I would say the majority of people, that's kind of a last resort approach. But unfortunately, it's used as a max fat loss approach in most people who shouldn't be on it. So I'm glad we kind of share similar opinions on that.
And you give some less animal protein options for people who are trying to get around that as well,
exactly.
Which is good, because that's one of the things I struggle with is getting the right mix of protein and fats, because I grew up in the time when it was all carbohydrates.
Oh.
I'm a big carbohydrate guy. I love them.
They're delicious.
Right? I don't have a problem with sweets or any of that stuff, but just regular old carbohydrates, fruit and veg, I love that stuff.
Right.
It's pretty good. Okay, so you've been working with people now with this methodology, one-on-one, and you've got your book out there. What have you seen? What's some of the feedback you're getting? What are some of the success stories?
Oh, wow. High cholesterol drops so quickly once we get blood sugar stabilized, and once we start to eliminate, number one, sugar, number two, we are getting rid of processed foods, which those are rife with our soybean oil, hydrogenated vegetable oils. These are our two top contributors to high cholesterol. So I love seeing those numbers come down. Love seeing the reversing of type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people say, wait, what? But yeah, I mean, type 2 diabetes is onset through your nutrition. And so when we can really learn how to stabilize blood sugar, which is the controlling of what will cause blood sugar to go up, which is carbohydrates and sugar. And it's not so much, okay, stay away from them. It's no, learn how they work and respect them and help anchor that. These small little principles can be very, very helpful. Above all, I think the best part of what I do, because I work with all types of demographics, whether they're bodybuilders, whether they're very overweight, whether they are binge eaters, emotional eaters, or I've even worked with people with anorexic tendencies. And realizing that nutrition principles, when we can take this mindset of they're all adaptable, and whenever we hear a nutrition principle out there in this crazy mismatched and misinformation rife world, instead of saying, is that right or is that wrong, what we should be saying is this applicable to me? And if so, how can I begin adapting this in my life? I love that my people become critical thinkers. They learn how to ask the real questions rather than take yes or no stock answers. They know I will never give them that. If they say, can I have this? I say, let's think about it. What's it composed of? What is the strategy for your body? What are you learning about these principles? And when we can begin to think like that, that is the game changer for every person out there.
Yeah, and it's very individual specific. That's the other thing that people miss is they're looking for a broad brush solution. And what you'd like to give them or what you're calling strategies or tool set, right, a kit that says apply these to you and see what you get.
Right, exactly. Right? I love the word you say, toolkit. That's exactly it.
Because it's very individual. If you look at somebody like me, for instance, I'm a male. I'm sitting right now at 174 pounds, and I work out 7 days a week. That's a different calorie load, a different body fat percentage than a woman of a different age with less activity or whatever. I'm going to be eating third more calories a day than a woman of the same condition, right?
Exactly.
So it's individual to you. Very good. This is a very hard thing to do because you got to get all these things right with the mindset, and then you have the tools to execute the mindset. If you got somebody who's really struggling, who has all these combinations of problems with body dystopia or whatever they call it, right?
Yeah.
They have binge and purge. They don't have the right tools. They're confused. They're depressed. What's the first step?
As I run a course that helps people with this binge eating and cyclical behavior, the very first week, what we work on is the awareness and identification. That can be a really hard thing for people to admit that they're experiencing some behavior that's not healthy and it's time to change. Sometimes we get so comfortable being uncomfortable that we don't realize we have the power to take control. And so stepping back from ourselves, I like to think of taking a third-party, unbiased view. I like to think of floating up above oneself and looking down on the situation without any bias and saying, okay, what is going on in logical explanations? So then when a person can do this, they see, oh, right, there's a trigger going on. This person is stressed. This person is not sleeping enough. They're referring to themselves, of course. They're realizing there's all these things going on that they actually have the power to begin making some changes. So we start addressing those. We start making lists and saying, what are these things we do have the power over? Oftentimes, it's a break in something in our life that is causing us to weaken our resolve.
There's one keystone thing, one keystone emotion or keystone habit or keystone food that you can focus on. If you pull that out, the rest will sort of domino behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we can pull that out and begin focusing on it, then we begin to learn and expand from there. I love when people set their goals to overcome the greatest obstacle of the prior week. Every Sunday, I tell my people, set an alarm in your phone. It needs to go off every Sunday, and that's when you say, what have I done well? What are my triumphs? And what are my obstacles? What's holding me back from being the person I want to be in nutrition, fitness, mindset, and spiritual? I like to work in those 4 categories. They work really well together. And then when we identify that obstacle, we set a very laser-focused, specific goal to overcome it. That's our starting point. If someone's experiencing these types of behaviors and tendencies, I wouldn't say, you just need to follow this meal plan. Oh, no, worst advice ever. We say, let's start identifying.
I was talking last week about people using 30-day plans this way, right? If you can identify 1 or 2 habits and just work on those for 30 days. And it kind of turns it into a game, and you can get that positive momentum. right? You're doing the same thing with your approach and your meal planning, too, because you're locking them in for the first month or so to say, just do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say on that whole game thing, as adults, we need to remember we need rewards. We need incentives. And we shouldn't necessarily make those a food-based reward. But
right.
Setting ourselves up for, like, I love to go shopping for new gym clothes, or I love to give myself a pedicure, and earning those things rather than just expecting everything to happen in your life. And when you put forth the behavior and the focus and the effort, it's really fun to earn those rewards. So that can be a cool system for people to start thinking about.
Yeah, you know what? My biggest reward, I just dropped like maybe 10 pounds, right? Not a lot for me. But this time of year, it's so hot some days. Mm-hmm. Being able to go outside and run without my shirt on and not worry about it was a giant win for me in the last month. So
that's amazing. How's that feel, though? How's that feel, though, to be able to have that confidence?
Oh, it feels great.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I notice with these sort of 30-day habit plans, whether it's sleep or alcohol or nutrition, whatever you're doing, there's this time period around 7 to 8 days, somewhere in there, where it's like coming off a drug addiction. It's awful. And I think people have to realize that, and I think that's where a lot of people, they lose it. They give up.
Right.
Because it's just awful. Your body almost is detoxing at that point.
Exactly.
For example, in a diet plan where you're switching to a good mix. Yeah. So how do you help people through that?
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, the biggest thing you can do is try to minimize the obligations in your life during that time, because if you can sleep more, that's your best tool. Secondly is making sure you're getting plenty of water. That has to be high on the priority list. And it's amazing how many people aren't getting at least 70 ounces of water per day. That's a problem. And so starting there. Next, this one's a little bit out of the box, and I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, but if there is someone out there that maybe this can benefit, I'm nervous to share it, but I'm going to, especially if it's coming off a lot of high caffeine. I work with a lot of people who are doing 2, 3, maybe 4 energy drinks a day, tons of coffee, and that's what's getting them through. We don't want to just cold turkey it. I'd really recommend not doing that because that's really rough on your body. But starting to wean yourself down, you can actually take a simple caffeine supplement tablet, and they often come in 200 milligram tablets. And so you have a very regimented weaning off cycle. So maybe for 4 days you cut it in half, and then for 3 more days you then reduce that by half again until you're down to, the goal would be 0, but definitely under 200 milligrams a day is ideal. With the sugar thing, are you going to experience headaches? Are you going to feel that fog and missing it, and perhaps even some digestive issues? Absolutely. That happens every day. I have a 10-day power up where I help people's bodies do this. And if they're coming from a high carbohydrate, high sugar background, they kind of have some tummy trouble in the runs for a few days. And usually by day 4 or 5, things start to clean up again. They feel so much better. And I would just say with that, let it run its course, but hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. And remember that you've got to train your body. Like you said earlier, the body is powerful. And so we remember that we're helping our bodies evolve. We've conditioned them to a certain thing, and then you change the premise of that. Of course, it's going to have a different response. So stay the course and allow your body to evolve. Be patient, be persistent. It's almost like you have to treat yourself like a child. You have to be the adult, the spirit inside your body, and train your body. That's what I love. Train it, condition it.
Yeah, but I find it fun, too, because you're discovering new things. You're like,
yeah.
Oh, wow, look at this.
Yeah.
I stopped drinking caffeine. Now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I can't keep my eyes open, right?
Right.
Or I'm starving to death, and I don't know why, right? So you see your body, again, with that detachment, like you said, looking at yourself as an experiment, you can go, look at that.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, and those little aha moments are so cool, especially when people do this for the first time, and they're like, I didn't know my body responded like that. It's exciting.
Yeah. And then that goes all the way back, and this is how we'll wrap it up, Kristy Jo. That goes all the way back to how you introduced your book, where you said, wouldn't it be nice to be in control, right?
Yeah.
And by having this, by looking at, I pull this string and this happens, that gives you the toolkit to be in control of your own body. And then that makes everything special.
It does. Powering our bodies, it just is a mindset, and it's a change of the view of oneself and saying, you know what, I'm worth it. not in an egotistical way, but in a value, realizing if we're going to go out and be of value to this world, we've got to have the energy and the longevity to support that. And that's what I love.
Yep. How can people find your work and get to you?
Sure. I'm all over social media. You can find me on Facebook, Body Buddies, Instagram at BodBuds, BODBUDS, and my website is www.body-buddies.com.
All right. And your book?
Yes, The Power Foods Lifestyle. I actually give it away for free. People just have to pay shipping. Help me out with that. So it's powerfoodslifestyle.com.
And they can get to that through your website.
Exactly.
All right. Awesome.
Well, thank you
very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right.